I'm learning all about the resistance in Hawaii right now. The Mauna Kea. Yeah. I wish I knew about it sooner. I feel like an idiot. I do. Why did it take me so long? Some days are not okay. I'm finally okay. Okay, good. Okay, good. Some days are not okay. I'm finally okay with not being okay. Some days I'm not okay, and I'm finally okay with not being okay. Some days I'm a fucking up mess, and I digress. I'm a work in progress. Most days I'm just trying to hold space, but there's so much pain, just so overwhelming. This video is a collection of some of my favorite artists. Some of these artists are personal friends, some I've never met, and some are somewhere in between. I have had the blessing of being surrounded by artists all my life. I think it's really powerful to surround ourselves with people who inspire and uplift us, and I have definitely found that to be true for my own art and creativity. I found it both inspiring and emotional to put this video together. It stirred up in me my own grief about having had my art on the shelf for a few years, and my frustration and sadness over having lost the momentum I once had. I don't know if I will be able to get that back again, but I know I have to at least try. In the words of British artist Heidi Loker, if you don't go right for the thrust of what you most want to do, then life is meaningless, at least for me. Another quote I'm resonating with right now is from a song by Nako Bear with Medicine for the People. He says, "It's a miracle I love myself enough to share myself in a world so full of haters." Thank you, Nako and Heidi, and thank you to all these beautiful artists for creating your art and having the courage to express and share yourself and your creativity. Artists are my favorite people to be around. They're my tribe. Our creativity connects us to our humanity. In the book Art and Fear, there's another quote I love. It says, "Entire cultures have existed without the invention of the wheel, but no culture in all of history has ever existed without art." Okay, so this is Kelsey, who I used to share a studio with in the Film Mechanics building. And now this is her studio in the Riverview station. Is that where we are?
Yeah, that's us.
Okay, so let's turn. I feel like authentic is the new black, right? That's what I like to tell myself these days. I like it. It's very liberating. Or the new whatever, the new fashion trend.
The new fashion trend.
Just be yourself. Yeah, so you're working on all these ideas and you're in school. Do you want to say anything to the camera? No. Kelsey we used to share a studio, and she was on the upstairs part and I was on the downstairs part. And I just remember looking up into the loft. Oh, there's people coming. Okay, bye. Kelsey and I met in 2018, about 6 months or so before I left for New Mexico. She had heard that I was planning to move to New Mexico, so she reached out to me and asked me if she could move into my studio when I moved out. It's sometimes hard to find a studio in the River Arts District in Asheville, and they tend to go to people who already have a connection with someone in the building. I was still not completely sure that I wanted to move to New Mexico, actually, but I was struggling to pay my studio rent at the time, so I asked her if she wanted to share the space with me. She agreed, and it worked out really smoothly because there was a loft in the studio, and Kelsey ended up using that as her space, so I was able to keep using the space that I was already used to using. When I moved out to move to New Mexico, Kelsey took it over, and it felt like a really perfect and easy transition. This is the art of Elizabeth Porritt Carrington.
She paints beautiful landscapes and forests and flowers and nature scenes. Elizabeth had a studio in the Film Mechanics building when I first arrived back from having gone to art school at the Burren College of Art on the west coast of Ireland in 2016. The Burren College of Art is in County Clare, and Elizabeth grew up in County Clare, and her sister went to the Burren College of Art. The Burren College of Art is a very tiny school in a very quiet rural area in Ireland. Not many Irish people know about it because it's a private school and they get to go to school for free as EU citizens, so they don't often choose to go there. So it was very synchronistic that Elizabeth even knew about it, let alone was from there, especially right after I got back. It was crazy. There was also another synchronicity that we had. In 2014, I had a studio in a place called the Dry Goods Shop. It was a shared studio space and storefront for textile artists. Elizabeth brought in a button-down shirt that had belonged to her dad who had passed away. She wanted to have it turned into a woman's blouse that she could wear. I was making skirts and dresses at the time. I wasn't there when she brought in the shirt, but the other women in the studios asked me later if I wanted to take on the project. I said yes and made the blouse, and then when Elizabeth came to pick it up, I wasn't there again, so I actually never met her during that time. Later on, when I got back from Ireland and moved into a studio right next to hers, we made the connection. I first learned about Jacqueline Maloney in 2015 because I got matched with an herbalist through the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine to help me with a chronic cough that I had. There was a little herbal shop that I was directed to go to pick up my tinctures and teas. I first saw Jackie's art there. It was a series of these beautiful works on paper that were up on the walls. I was so mesmerized. So I looked her up and started following her blog. Then when I was out in Ireland at art school, I found myself turned off by the overly intellectualized art that I was being pressured to make, and I went to Jackie's blog for encouragement and inspiration. I felt so flooded with nourishment from reading her blog that I printed it out and taped it to the inside of the bathroom stall doors at the school. Then, when I returned from Ireland, I posted on Facebook that I was looking for a studio mate, and Jackie responded. So we connected and shared a studio in the Film Mechanics building for a little while, until another studio opened up next door to us and I decided I wanted to have my own space. But then we were neighbors. Chelsea is one of those people who just seems to be all over the place creatively, in a good way. I first met her in 2019 when I moved to New Mexico to go to art therapy school. A former student from the school was organizing a production of the Vagina Monologues, and everyone involved in it was students or staff from the school. Chelsea and I were both involved. Chelsea had just graduated and I was just starting. Right away, I noticed Chelsea because of the way she carries herself and dresses, and her aesthetic, no matter what she's up to, is always beautiful. Later, I saw that she was facilitating art therapy groups at Meow Wolf. I went. Then I saw that she was running an online women's group. I joined. She was also participating in these little pop-up shops where she had these small, beautiful collages that she was selling. Next, she was making beautiful pottery. Then she was teaching pottery classes as a form of art therapy called Clay as Care. Then she was involved in the dye garden at a local farm and making naturally dyed textile art. Then she was painting beautiful medicinal plants, complete with information about them on the painting, and there was a show. Then she was doing an artist residency at the Burren College of Art, where I went to school. All this while organizing activism work in creative ways and running a thriving business as an art therapist in her own private practice. Some people, I just don't know how they do it. Chelsea's one of those people. Once I ran into her on a hike in the woods with her dog, and she looked perfect. I wonder sometimes, is this person real? Nellie is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She is so full of friendliness and joy and playfulness. I met Nellie when I had a show in a little gallery called the Bloom Gallery in Thomas, West Virginia in 2018. I somehow saw her Instagram feed before I ever went out there, and I felt like we were already friends. As soon as I met her, I felt close to her. She has a huge, beautiful studio in downtown Thomas that also doubles as her adorable home. But it's hard to tell where home ends and studio begins. It's all sort of mixed together in a really beautiful way. She also opened a storefront, which I was so glad to have gotten to see when I went to pick up my paintings, finally, in 2022. Nellie is a painter, a clothing designer, and a roller skater. Nellie paints on large pieces of fabric and then uses that fabric to make beautiful, fun, playful clothes. She's also a muralist and painted a beautiful, huge mural in downtown Thomas. I love you, Nellie. Thank you for your creativity and your beautiful, fun, playful spirit. Amy Sherald is someone most people will have heard about. She's world famous, and she painted Michelle Obama's official presidential portrait. I learned about Amy Sherald in 2017 because she had done a talk with Creative Mornings, which I listened to online. Her talk was about how she had taught art classes in a prison to the inmates. She shared about that in such a genuine, compassionate, kind, non-judgmental way, and I was really drawn to her as a person. I recognized in her a natural healer. I started following her and learning more about her story, and I also got to see a show of hers in LA in 2021. I read somewhere that she said she was finally experiencing what she had prayed so hard for all those years ago. I always notice when someone talks about prayer, especially an artist. I wondered what exactly she had prayed for. Recently, I read another article where she talks about prayer, only this time there was a slightly different tone to it. She said that success had brought its own baggage, which I can imagine, and I had also sort of wondered about that for her because I don't think that the art scene at that level in America is a very friendly place to be. She said, I feel like I'm on survival mode. It's like, wait a minute, is this what I asked for? Is this my life? Is this what I wanted when I was like, God, please let me be successful? Of course, she's always free to pray for something else or for a change or for more peace, and I hope she finds that. I'm glad she's in this world, though, and creating her beautiful art. Pauline Buick is a famous Irish artist. I first saw Pauline Buick's work by accident when I was in Dublin with my school, the Burren College of Art, in 2015. We were taking a class trip to Dublin and went to all kinds of fancy galleries and museums. But during my free time, I just wandered around by myself and ended up finding this giant solo show of decades of her work in a smallish gallery. It was like walking into a candy store. I love how she uses mixed media and will glue lace and textiles and sometimes plants onto her watercolor paintings. There were pieces in this show that she had made when she was a child, and it was all originals. I don't know how I got so lucky. It might be a permanent exhibition, I'm not sure, but I'm so glad I found it. I looked her up afterwards and read a little bit about her life. I read that she spent time in Samoa making art. There's a quote that I found in one of her journals that I'd like to share. I copied it into my sketchbook while I was in Ireland. I think we could all learn a lot from it in our weird, dysfunctional, patriarchal, abusive American Western culture. She writes, Dr. Gregory said, the Samoan follies remained the same from the olden days. In those days, there were no taboos about dress or sex. Not until John Williams changed things. He made people cover their bodies and feel guilty and made sex taboo. This shame, I believe, caused psychological problems. In the past, a child sees everything, birth, death, and sex. They watched mothers give birth in their open follies. Today they don't know how the process comes about. Nikki is a friend of mine from the Byrne College of Art. She is an Australian artist. She was in her first year of her MFA program when I arrived in Ireland. She was painting huge paintings of David Bowie when I first met her. And then she went home for Christmas break. And when she came back, she had this amazing burst of uninhibited creativity and was just churning out sketch after sketch of the most startlingly creative images. I had a studio right across from hers during this time, and I remember being a bit jealous. Okay, I was a lot jealous. She was just absolutely on fire. She is now working as an artist in Australia, and she creates paintings of animals inspired by the Australian wildlife and farm life. And the animals have human bodies. I did a photo shoot of her before we parted ways, and then painted her portrait when I got back to Appalachia. And here's a sketch I made of her in my sketchbook while we were in school together. Amber is an incredible and very successful artist. And when I think about her, I have this feeling like she's a famous person that I used to know. She was already very successful when I met her, though. I met Amber in 2016, right away when I got back from going to art school in Ireland. I was looking for a studio, and the first one I found was in Marshall High Studios in Marshall, North Carolina. It's an old high school on an island in the middle of the French Broad River that has been converted into art studios. I shared a studio with another artist in that building for about a month and a half, and during that time I got to be part of the fun, creative community of the Marshall High Studios. There's a back porch on the building, and everyone would have potluck dinners there once a week. It was such a fun vibe. That's where I first met Amber. I remember her telling me very unpretentiously that she made backpacks. She did other things too, she said, but backpacks were her bread and butter. Backpacks, I thought? I pictured like a boring, gray, normal backpack. And then I got to go into her studio for the first time, and I became completely obsessed with her. I remember going back into my studio and telling my studio mate, "Have you seen Amber's studio?" I was swooning. I had the immense privilege of becoming Amber's friend and hanging out with her in her studio for that month and a half, while I had a studio there in the Marshall High Studios before I moved to the Film Mechanics building. There was a studio that opened up in the Marshall High Studios that I looked at and considered moving into before I made the move to the Film Mechanics building, and I often wonder what life would be like if I had decided to move into that studio instead of the Phil. It's one of those sliding door questions for me. It would have been a very different experience, and I would have made different paintings of different people. Who knows? Amber had a big presence in Marshall for a long time, and then a couple of years ago she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota. When I was hanging out with Amber back in 2016, she was just starting to incorporate her paintings into her business. She told me she had crunched the numbers and figured out that she could allow herself the space and time to focus more on her paintings because she really wanted that to be part of her business. It was amazing to watch that unfold and to see how seemingly seamlessly she did that. Soon afterwards, she was on the cover of a popular art magazine with her painting, and I heard her say that she was glad that they showed a picture of her painting rather than her backpacks because she felt she had officially incorporated that into her business. I used to be obsessed with Anthropologie, the women's clothing store. I still am, but I don't constantly look at their website and catalogs as often as I used to. Back in 2012, when I was still doing that on a regular basis, they posted on their website this gorgeous, mesmerizing video featuring this beautiful, mesmerizing artist named Rebecca Ray-Boucher. I've been following her and keeping track of what she's up to ever since. Before I had an Instagram account, I used to regularly visit her blog to see what inspiring things she had posted. What I loved about her blog was that she didn't seem like she was ever trying to be overly professional. She was just real. She was completely her uninhibited self. That really influenced me a lot, actually. I felt a sigh of relief because I've never been good at being quote-unquote professional, and I love it when I feel like I'm being given permission to just be myself. I also noticed that she had this very spiritual presence that I was really drawn to. I specifically remember a blog post that really spoke to me, where she talked about how the things we want to come to us. And her own life is an example of that. I watched as her art evolved over the years from simple paintings of balloons and ice cream cones to elaborate, sophisticated, whimsical, imaginative paintings of flora and fauna. When I was in art therapy school, I was in a class called Research Methods, which actually influenced me deeply because there was a lot of freedom in it regarding what we chose to research. Also, the teacher had a tangible spiritual life, which was infused into the way she taught the class. For one of my research projects, I chose the subject of my research to be putting myself out there more and experimenting with opening my heart and having a voice in ways that I have been shy to, specifically sharing about the abuse I experienced in my childhood. I posted something on Instagram about how I wanted to incorporate sharing about abuse into how I share myself as an artist. And I mentioned Rebecca Rebouche in it because of how I think that being an artist and sharing our art is also about sharing our whole selves. And Rebecca is someone who does that, and I really love that about her. And she's such a cool person. After I posted that on Instagram, I received an Instagram message from Rebecca. Someone had watched my video and sent it to her, and she had reached out to me telling me that she saw it and that I was beautiful. I was so starstruck. I didn't know how to respond. I felt so shy. Since then, I occasionally respond to her always inspiring newsletters, and occasionally she writes me back with an incredibly heartfelt, unusually authentic message. Rebecca is just one of those people, I think, who is just fully and completely herself. She puts her whole self out there without hesitation or holding back. She's a kind, genuine, wholehearted kind of person. I look up to her so much.